Welcome to the Schmoopydady streaming experience. I'm your host, as per usual, Schmoopydady. If it's the first time watching the stream, the VOD, or the video on YouTube. I'm a monthly Hearthstone Wild Legend player who typically hits Legend first of the month, and after that I goof off. And when I goof off, I play your decks. But tonight, I'm going to do one of my yap sessions. First thing I want to talk about are lessons learned from the West versus East conquest competition that was just played this weekend. I won't spoil who won in case you want to go and watch back the VODs. But, no, yes, I will. OTZ won. OTZ is busted. OTZ defeated all comers, including any Chinese player that stood within his way or her way. I'm not sure. I need a spreadsheet. Anyway, OTZ kicked ass, and OTZ won. I love OTZ. But we learned some things about the conquest format of Wild, especially if you're going to play it in tournaments or other settings like THL, which we'll talk about later. So first, let's talk about the conquest as a format in general. Maybe you're not used to competitive tournament Hearthstone play, and you're like, what's conquest? Conquest is a format where you bring 4 decks, or you bring 3 decks, and you play against an opponent who also brings 3 or 4 decks. You ban one of your opponent's decks, and then you play a best of with the remaining decks. So if I bring 4 decks, my opponent will ban 1. I will have 3 decks, with which I will have to get 1 win each. Once a deck gets a win, it is through. I don't have to play it again. In fact, it's banned for the rest of our match until all 3 of my decks have got a win, or all 3 of my opponent's decks have gotten a win. THL, Team Hearth League, is a arena which ends up, it's a grassroots organization that runs conquest formats, both in standard and wild, and sometimes battlegrounds duos, among other settings. Every season, every expansion, basically every expansion is a new season in THL, so you know that you can gear up for a competitive tournament-style Hearthstone if you play in THL around the start of every season. So if you're interested in joining THL now, where you could play as a free agent when people need to drop out and people need to take time and can't make their matches, and you want to be available to step in and play a little competitive tournament-style Hearthstone and get your toes dipped in before you find a team start of next expansion, you can absolutely do that. But we just had one of these sort of conquest-style events, West versus East, and the reason why it's called West versus East is it was 8 players from the Western servers, EU and NA, versus 8 players from the China server. And the China server, I believe, had to go through a preliminary playoff roulette single elimination style tournament in and of itself to determine the 8 players when they were playing. So you got 8 of us. I was one of the Western players chosen versus 8 of the Chinese players. We were all paired up across from one another, and then however the bracket went from there, single elimination, you'd have whoever played until the very end. All right. In the conquest format, the ban is huge because you can plan to bring decks that are maybe weak against a common ladder opponent, but in the vacuum of conquest, if they don't have to worry about that opponent, if you always plan on banning that one particular deck, they become a lot stronger and their matchup spread gets better. Great example would be, let's say you have a deck that hates Shadow Priest, doesn't like Shadow Priest. You can always plan to ban Shadow Priest and bring 3 decks that would normally do poorly into Shadow Priest but do well into other decks. Or another example I would suggest is doing something like taking, you want to ban Hostage Mage, or want to ban Holy Wrath. You sort of plan to ban these matchups going in, and you build your lineup around that. Along those lines, the best decks in this conquest format, I think we found out in West versus East, were easily Hostage Mage and Questline Demon Hunter. 1 and 2, 2 and 1, however you want to line them up, however you want to build them. The 2 examples that I have are the Hostage Mage that I brought. OTZ took that Hostage Mage list. He didn't have Dirty Rat. He didn't have Audio Amplifier. He cut those and put in Shax. Shack is great tech for Questline Demon Hunter because post-glide you can be found a lot of times without enough refill or not getting your right cards, and otherwise without glide, Hostage Mage is super, super, super favored into Questline Demon Hunter. So it's almost worth, if Questline Demon Hunter is going to be one of your most common best matchups, to play the Shacks so that post-glide you can draw into stuff and not die immediately. OTZ had the Shacks teched in there for that specific matchup. I did not. I ended up actually winning that matchup just fine. But, I believe in this list, and I really liked Lasagna, who was one of the Western players, the example of Questline Demon Hunter that they brought. One of the common decks that these two decks don't want to see is Shadow Priest. So if, let's say, I wanted to bring these two decks and always ban Shadow Priest, these two decks had a lot of free range to do very well in that competition. The other two things that we learned, I think, is, three things. Number one, Holy Wrath in general in the tournament did not do well. I would have considered Holy Wrath the best deck in the format going forwards. Going into the tournament, because just as a ladder deck, because it always felt like when I queued into it, they always had the nuts. I was always getting, minus 125, but that didn't play out in the tournament itself. And there are a couple of reasons for that. Maybe it was a little bit easier to aggro down. Maybe, all the Questline Demon Hunters able to interfere with mana counts and with how the deck was set up. I don't know. It didn't play out that way in the tournament. The tournament is, a bigger sample size than, individual perspectives going in. But talking with KVLT earlier today about what he took away from the tournament, that was one of the things that struck him, was just like, man, we are kind of overrating Holy Wrath a little bit in our minds, and maybe it's not as good a deck as we think it is. Another thing that I think we could take into account is I was surprised that we didn't see as much Shadow Priest brought. Here's an example of my XL Shadow Priest that we can kind of look at. I was surprised that this deck didn't get brought, both more often in XL and 30 form. KVLT thinks that it didn't get brought as much because it doesn't fit into a lot of lineups as well. I would have brought it maybe as band bait, maybe to be a little bit more, if I expected a lot of Questline Demon Hunter, I expect a lot of Hostage Mage. This deck typically does pretty well into those two decks. But at the same time, there's a lot of decks in the format that farm it. Seedlock was another very popular deck that people brought, and Seedlock is not a good matchup for Shadow Priest. Holy Wrath can be kind of 50-50. Call to Arms Paladin, which is a very strong deck right now, which did not really get brought. Only 2 players brought it, though OTZ, who won the whole thing, did bring it. Absolutely eats this deck alive. So there's reasons why I didn't bring it, but I was still surprised that more people didn't bring it as just kind of like brain dead, bring pressure type deck, both 30 or XL forms. A couple people brought XL. 1 or 2 people brought 30. Another thing that I thought was interesting that we could take away from it is Weblord is just kind of busted, and it's not completely out of the ordinary or shocking that Call to Arms Paladin ended up being one of the 4th decks that did so well in the tournament. This deck is sort of leaning on a couple things right now. This deck is leaning on Narrowbar Weblord just being very good in the meta. This deck is leaning on Prismatic Beam and Showdown as a combo, and this deck is leaning on Call to Arms. And when you kind of boil it down, that's most of the deck. And these parts of the deck, like Order in the Court to go get my Prismatic Beams, or Call to Arms to pull out my Weblords, there's a lot of facilitation of like kind of doing the broken thing in this list, and then filtering out stuff out of your deck so that you can keep doing the broken thing. So that didn't shock me so much, and maybe it means that we should have, or I should have, brought something like Blessed Priest. I know KVLT says he really wishes he brought Blessed Priest. So let's say you are going to play in a conquest format in Wild. What is the best team to bring? Well, if you're comfortable with it, and I kind of agree with KVLT on this, I think you always bring some form of Hostage Mage. If you don't like my Hostage Mage, take a different version. I know KVLT and Maxi play a different one with devolving missiles and more rats and things like that. I don't like it as much. I like more along the lines of what OTZ brought. Again, he didn't bring the rat and the audio amplifier. He brought 2 shacks in their list. Bring some sort of quest line. Demon Hunter. Deck is very good into anything slow, and it's also fairly decent when you need to into faster stuff. But you could always ban Shadow Priest if you really don't want to see Shadow Priest. KVLT would bring Mali Druid, which is amazing because this deck has actually been nerfed recently with Dungar Druid. Dungar being pushed to 10 mana doesn't really functionally change too much how the deck plays. Obviously, there are some sequences that are going to be a little bit slower, but Aviana is a hell of a drug, and 9 times out of 10, Dungar is just going to cost 1 anyway. So we have ways to sort of go around it. This deck is particularly strong into anything except for Shadow Priest. Hyper aggro kind of messes with it a little bit. So if you're looking to ban aggro, this is a fantastic deck to bring. It's very resilient against disruption. There are even some sort of funny versions where you could do stuff like you can decide you're going to cut the wild growths or something like that and end up bringing like 1 copy of Champions of Azeroth and 1 copy of Shattered Reflections for the memes. I don't think that's the best way to play the deck, but I've seen that fairly commonly brought about and posted in Neon 31's Discord. So that's an interesting way to take and play the deck. All right. His final 4th deck, if he was going to play a Conquest format, would be Blessed Priest. It beats a lot of the 4th decks. If you are going to leave Shadow Priest up, this absolutely smashes Shadow Priest. But it's a little bit hard to pilot. You're looking for a lot of early tempo and a lot of early draw into, eventually buffing up a Crab Rider or getting Weblord down and buffing it up and going face. So this is also a very affordable list. I would suggest playing it. Most people would also maybe bring Call to Arms or some form of Shadow Priest. Again, just because it's like, well, you have the reps. It's not hard to play, and it does apply a lot of pressure. But I don't know. So that would be like my takeaways from West versus East. But the main gist of what I wanted to do tonight as a video was I wanted to go through basically what would I play now. And we've already talked about Hostage Mage. Hostage Mage, great deck. Love this list. I'd play it in a heartbeat. You saw me play it to pretty good effect in West versus East. If you caught that, I will be posting that VOD on YouTube. Questline DH, great deck. Not a lot of debate here. Very interesting thing that Lasagna's done. Lasagna has cut a Consume Magic that would normally be played in here, which is pretty good if you don't want your opponent to play Void Touch Attendant. I don't know if Lasagna ended up considering banning Void Touch Attendant or, banning Shadow Priest, so you don't need 2 consumes as often. Did play 1 Illidari Studies for the flex. Studies is getting weaker and weaker as the expansions come out and we get more and more Outcast cards, but it's still sort of playable now, and it can get you a second glide if your matchup really needs it. So I liked this version. I don't mind featuring this version. This is a solid version of Questline Demon Hunter. OTZ's Call to Arms Paladin. I see no reason to run any other version. The Seal of Blood being a holy spell is a little bit of a considering we have High-Ho Silverwing and High-Ho Silverwings getting our Crusader auras is kind of nice. The Redemptions for that reason is also kind of but they played this to the championship, so there you go. Already talked about KVLT's Mali Druid and why we'd play the Mali Druid. Already talked about the Blessed Priest. Astral Communion. I think this is a real deck. I think it's a real deck in the same way KVLT put it best. And KVLT just raided. Thank you for the raid, KVLT. Welcome, KVLT people. I'm currently recording a thing for YouTube's. So Astral Communion is very similar to like Big Shaman, but for me right now it feels maybe more consistent than Big Shaman in a weird way. The trail mixes and the innervates mean that we can get Astral Communion down on turn 2 fairly regularly. And this list is set up so that whatever you top deck, you can kind of go nuts with, except for the Aviana. The Aviana is probably the one of the flex parts here. I'm running Bran in my ETC, and I'm running Astalor on my bottom end. So I like having the Aviana to do the funny Aviana Bran goofiness combo. I initially got like the skeleton for this from a player named Pelthun who first posted it. But I'll be honest with Astral Communion. Astral Communion is like the Jungle Juice or the Long Island Iced Tea of Wild Hearthstone decks. It doesn't actually matter all that much what your giant ass top end is, as long as it's something that's a little bit overwhelming. I think like the robots that print ogres that like go against minions and are like minimized, like those are a decent shout. Somebody suggested Flint. I tried Flint and hated him, but like if you have Flint, freaking go for it. Like whatever big shit you have, if you don't want to have to craft a couple of Death Wings, don't craft Death Wings. Do something else, right? You can you can throw in some big idiots. It's actually, Neptulon is a good shout in a list like this. You can throw in some giant idiots. You can Astral Communion. You can play your giant idiots starting sometimes as early as turn 2. I never pulled off a turn 1 Astral Communion. Zeddy has with the XL version. But I think this is a realish list, and it's fairly competitive. I've pushed this list out to a couple different people. I've posted it in my Discord. Everybody that's reported back has said they've had some crazy win streaks with it, so I think it's playable. Is it tier 1? Nah. Tier 3? Sure. XL Shadow Priest, I'm not going to spend too much time on. I've posted this list a couple different times. The real sub that I've had to make is since they nerfed Gorgon Zormu, and since they got rid of Raza, I cut my ETC that had Raza resealed in it, and I cut Gorgon Zormu, and I put in the Hopeful Dryads. Because, kind of like 3 drops, just sort of keeping the curve the same and getting you the dream cards. Kind of liked it. I've kind of liked it. Is it perfect? Probably not. I've seen Iced Dill going back to Ethereal Oracles. I don't remember if Iced Dill is still playing Raised Deads or not to activate the Oracles. I feel like if you're running Oracles, you start thinking about putting Raised Deads back in, but Raised Dead is very stinky. Anyway, this deck isn't all that complicated to play, and what I like about it is it doesn't lose to a single board clear. You kind of have sustain and value that you can sort of stick around for a while and keep taking a beating. The 2 Holy Wrath lists that I'm going to showcase are the Indolent, who is one of the Chinese players from West versus East. I liked his Reno Holy Wrath list. Seemed fine to me. KVLD's XL Holy Wrath list. Lots of survivability, ways to generate coins. Seemed good to me. I like the Eridar Brutes. I probably should have brought something like this instead of the 30 version that I brought because I felt like I lost a tempo a lot of times when things didn't quite go my way. Like the 2 Night of Anointments, like the Christology, everything's here to do what you need to do. Solid 40 list. As I go down, the lists are going to get a little bit less of a tier list and more they're going to get more copy. I'm less willing to stand up and say, hey, you should absolutely play this list. Reno Druid, this list in particular by Itsoli, who plays this fairly high on EU, has been featured in probably the most. This deck might be featured in most of my videos when I do like a compilation of like, here, I won a couple games on stream. Check it out. I've played this list a lot on stream. I've won a lot on stream. It does have some weird flex spots. I don't know about the Jerry Rig Carpenter. And, I don't know about the Sleepy Resident. But, it all just sort of works. And I've liked Juicy Psych Melon in the list. And, fine guff, fine ramp, good things happen to you. Summer Flower Child, kind of a weird inclusion. But yeah, you can kind of get away with it because it's got the things that matter. It's got Bran Astalor. It's got value. Rey Estraza's nest doesn't get deleted by Reno Lone Ranger anymore. You can just sort of Reno all over them and win the game. OTZ's 4th deck that they brought to West versus East is Miracle Rogue. Looks very much like what Femboy Germa hit rank 1 with. Also, what Corb posted very early on in the expansion. We're doing Swiftstale Trickster to sometimes get value from Saladrasil, and then playing a 1-drop something to corrupt Saladrasil before we play it, whether that's going to be Prize Plunderer or whether that's going to be Blackwater Cutlass. What I like is OTZ cut a Blackwater Cutlass, which is already kind of like a lackluster card, and added a Shadow Step. The Shadow Step, I think, might actually add a fair amount of flexibility to the list, and I know they got at least one lethal in the tournament because they had the Shadow Step included. It was like a Zeph, Shadow Step, Zeph again for Flare kind of play. That was pretty sick. So, I like this list a lot. If you haven't played it for no other reason, it's very fun. It's a little bit difficult if you're facing Shadow Priest and Hyper Aggro. Copper Scum's Quest Mage. I love Quest Mage. This deck is so much fun to play. This is my preferred way to build it. I've seen some people take volume up, cut it for research project. I understand why you do that. I wouldn't, but I understand why you would do that. I've seen some people cut Stellar Balance for like cram session or something. I see why you do that. I wouldn't do that. Stellar Balance is like another copy of Conjure Mana Biscuit, where if you cast Rewind and get Stellar Balance, you get 2 0-mana things, which is really the important function of most important function of Stargazing, is we're trying to sort of print mana in some way. So these are things that I would play. Ping on 2, Mulligan for girls, Mulligan for Burn Down. Copper Scum does have a write-up for this on Reddit. I can include that in the video when I send the video. Master O has submitted this a couple different times and hit fairly good ranks on EU with like a Disruption style Reno lock. I've played it. List feels solid. I wouldn't suggest it any higher than this, but like if you really are itching to play a Reno lock list, you can play this. Ton of fun clears. I really like the Popgar Full-Blown Evil interaction. That's a lot of fun. Dark Skies is also fell and is reduced by Popgar. You're leaning on basically Popgar, early Sargeras with Symphony of Sins, and like just, raw disruption and clears. Not that hard to play. Kind of fun if you like that sort of Disrupto-Lock kind of feel. My Odin Warrior Cook, I've changed one card since I've posted it recently. I really liked that somebody on Neon 31's website cut Fizzle for Call to the Stand. Having a rat effect in the ETC makes a lot of sense to me. I like Fizzle a lot to break up my From the Depths sometimes, or to protect copies of Odin, but now that Odin's back to 8 and we're running 2 From the Depths, I'm finding it, and Fizzle's not main deck, I'm finding it less and less useful to have Fizzle at all in the list. And since most people don't have Fizzle anymore anyway, I was saying to sub Ignis, but Call to the Stand makes a lot of sense, just like as an additional like anti-fast combo card that you can run that can possibly have a high impact without totally tanking your list. Sinferno did a nice job taking a Fell Fatigue list by Wizzy and refining it a little bit. Usually Sinferno's got some whimsy when he builds some deck lists, and there's some weird fucked up cards in there. But, I really like how clean this list looks. There's 2 Health Stones. I don't know if you ever really cut Health Stone the way I've seen some of the Chinese players cut Health Stone. I think it completely transforms the way you play your deck, and you don't have to do too much. No, guys, I don't have the deck lists yet. Imprisoned Horror. Throwing me off my game. Sorry, chat. 2 Dirty Rats for some combo disruption. Curse of Agony looks like a dog shit card, but I think it's actually pretty strong in a meta with a lot of paladins that are constantly ordering their decks. It's just a cute tech card to just like, you're just shuffling the deck. You're playing this for the keyword shuffle. You're not playing this for the let's turn off Reno. Who gives a shit about that? You're playing it for the shuffle the shit, and then they don't have to go. They're less likely to hit you with the nuts after Order of the Court, especially if you're dealing with a lot of the crappy Exodia Paladin. This ruins their days. Okay. Vengeance Reno. I have played 5 or 6 games with this list, and I haven't lost yet. Is Reno Priest back? The funny in this list, like Reno Priest is a tempo deck, right? It's a tempo deck. It's a tech deck. It's like play cards, disrupt the opponent, slowly squeeze them off board, push them off board, win over the top with damage. The real funny in here is Aviana Elun's Chosen, post Sister Slavana, and Shadow Reaper Anduin, and you just go brrr. And like, if I'm honest, that is like super copy. Do not craft Aviana Elun's Chosen for this deck. Do not do it. But if you have her, I would give this deck list a shot. I haven't done the funny yet, but we'll get there. I really like Nightmare Lord Javis's contribution in this list because it's just another way to go get the minion that you want, and I like Dark Gifts. Dark Gifts are good, especially if you can hit this and play this for 7. That'd be neat. Mech Rogue is playable. Mech Rogue is playable. You really want Mimiron, or you really want Ziliax, which is Smorkiax, or you really want, barring those two, you want Lab Constructor. Have some reducers, have an early blowout turn, beat the person up. Kamas made this version, which is a little bit different than what Femboy Germa's playing. I really like Cold Blood. I like having stuff with stealth that I can then slap Cold Blood and a Wind Fury Spark Bot on it. That seems really fun to me. This is kind of aggro that's a little bit more cloak and dagger than your average board flood aggro. Playable, I like it a lot. Now again, we're getting into the copy, right? Arai sent me this Reno Rogue list after I shamed them for giving me a shitty Dragon Rogue list. And they spent a lot of time and care putting this list together. They have a whole spreadsheet where they go through all the options and cards that go into Reno Rogue. I'll be honest with you, Reno Rogue can be kind of a tough deck to play, in part because it's not very good. But sometimes, it does beat Shadow Priest. And it has some kind of crazy lines doing rogue stuff where you have bounces and you have mana discounts and you have scabs and you have shark and you have silly things that you can kind of do where it can be kind of hard to play. They're swearing by referral and they say it's better than Lotheb. I don't necessarily think that's a good idea. If you don't have this card, play Lotheb. I would just play Lotheb. Okay, or Boom Pistol Bully. If Weblord's good right now, Boom Pistol Bully has to be the absolute stone cold nuts, right? Some anti-combo and some bounce stuff in there as well. Playable list. Felt pretty good when I played it. I think this is clean. Okay, KVLT loves this deck. I've seen KVLT push this deck. This is the best questline deck. I've watched KVLT play this deck into Sparrowclaw, who might be the best Shadow Priest player right now, and get absolutely farmed by Shadow Priest. I think this has game into aggro, which makes it intriguing. I think that when you don't find the cards that you need, it's very frustrating. I think that I'm not necessarily the best pilot of this deck. By that being said, some version of 30 or 40 of this is probably pretty good, and KVLT really speaks highly of this, so I can't suggest it higher than this, but he's had success with it. He's had some crazy streaks with it, and it does beat slow stuff like a drum, and you have a chance into hyper aggro. So I'd give that a shot if you have the cards for sure, and you're an Il'gynoth DH enjoyer. Another deck that KVLT pointed out to me was the Sliplow Reno from West versus East. The thing that bugs the shit out of me about this deck is we have Selective Breeder, and we've got 1 beast, 2 beast, 3 beasts, 4 beasts, 5 beasts, 6 beasts main deck. That feels so icky to me. That feels like what I really want is I really want to consistently get my Dread Scale or my Acid Maw or my thing that does the thing that's unfair in Hunter with the Serpent Bloom or tokens. And instead I'm diluting that by adding a bunch of beasts. But, I did enjoy this. Apparently, this did win a game. This beat up a Shadow Priest. And I think Reno, it tells me that I think Reno Hunter and Drumonger Hunter are still probably decks that are alive and well, but nobody's playing them. If this is okay, then, we can make this better. But I'll feature this because KVLT liked it. Boogerworm. Okay, now we're getting into the real copy shit. All right, Boogerworm did well in THL with this disruption style Control, Reno, DK. If you really want to play DK in Wild, I think this is a pretty decent job of what that would look like. I especially like the Cattle Rustler into 8 hands for a lot of slower decks. I've played this list a fair amount off stream as well as on stream, and it does okay for me. But like, sometimes you still get anti-aggroed, but it has a lot of the deal 2 mana deal 3s. It's got Dreadhound Handler. It's got enough tools. Construction Quarter, you don't get blown out by aggro often, and then it has the natural disruption that Death Knight has to then go the distance and mess around with slower decks like Reno piles or slot piles that are trying to bully you. So I like this list. I might have Kill Jaden main deck, but that's just me. Ben from work did a similar job, but it dupes Triple Blood Death Knight. This is going to be a lot better into aggro, a little bit worse into combo and other things. But, you can run stuff like Razor Scales. I would run Far Watch Posts because Far Watch Posts slow stuff down. Now we have Wild Pyromancer Poison Breath. I think we're not giving DK enough credit in Wild for the disruption and the clears that it has. If you can farm aggro and then do okay into piles and disrupt combo, I think that means you're a good deck, or at least you're a decent deck. So I don't think we're giving enough love to DK right now, which is why I'm going to feature this list. But again, it's toward the bottom of the list for a reason. I'm not sticking my neck out for it, but if you really want to play DK in Wild and give this a shot, I would do so, and I think it might surpass your expectations. Last but not least, Pogo Rogue. I've had a lot of fun with this Pogo Rogue list off stream without the Ziliacs. The first list that I featured in a video was like, don't queue into Shadow Priest. Whatever you do, don't queue into Shadow Priest. With OG Ziliacs, Shadow Priest might be winnable. If you get your Pogos big enough and you slap Ziliacs on there, you might actually have a chance of winning. So give this a shot if you want to play Pogo Rogue. And what's really cool is the Twisted Web Weavers and the Lab Recruiters and the Pogo Hoppers. You can like shuffle Lab Recruiters into the deck with Lab Recruiter, and then the Lab Recruiters can then shuffle Twisted Web Weavers and Pogo Hoppers. And when you go infinite with Web Weavers, Lab Recruiters, and Pogo Hoppers, and you just shuffle, and you keep making boards that keep drawing cards, it's really fucking cool. And so this is a lot of fun. All right, so those are 23 decks and a breakdown of lessons we learned from West versus East. I know it's a really long yap session. Thank you to everybody in chat who came in from the KVLT raid who stuck it out. I'll start sending out codes and giving you these decks. And if you enjoy this content, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing on my YouTube channel.